The Ashen Room.
A wind moved through the shattered rafters of the boathouse, slow and disinterested, as if reluctant to disturb the broken silence. The river outside lapped against the warped wooden slots of the wall, indifferent to the blood pooling within. The air smelled of iron and old mildew, and Harry stepped in carefully, his foot squelching in a puddle of river water and something else.
Snape lay crumpled near the base of the wall, his body twisted slightly, as if he had tried to rise but abandoned the idea partway through. His black coat, now torn and soaked, clung to his frame like wet parchment on old stone. His hair was slicked back with sweat and blood. One hand gripped his side, not for survival, he must have known there was none, but for dignity, as if to die without clutching one's wound was a form of indecency.
Harry stared at him for a long moment. He felt no great shock, no rush of heroism or hatred, just cold and confusion. Why had he come? Snape's eyes fluttered open, clouded, wet, and still fierce. "You, Potter," he rasped, the name coming from his throat like something half swallowed. Harry hesitated. Snape coughed, and a thread of red spattered on his collar. Then he did something strange. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if embarrassed. When he opened them again, his voice had steadied, not in strength, but in rhythm. Like a man forcing himself to finish reading a letter he once vowed to burn. "In my coat," he said. "Left side, inner lining, a vial." Harry blinked. "A what?" "Vial. Take it. You must see. Not what he showed you. The rest. The rest."
"You must understand," Snape whispered. "Not because of me, because of her, because of what he became, and what I did, what I didn't." Harry wanted to ask 100 questions. Why now? Why him? Why hadn't he ever? But something in Snape's face stopped him. Not sorrow, not guilt, something flatter. Weariness, perhaps, of having carried himself through too many silences. "I hated your father," Snape said, the words dry, matter of fact. "But I never hated you." He coughed again, harder this time. A trembling seized his shoulder. The wound, deep, dark, magical, was eating him from the inside. "I watched you. I watched over you. Badly. I was never—" His eyes flicked shut. "Never kind." Harry didn't move. The river outside kept moving. Somewhere in the trees beyond, something called. Perhaps a bird, perhaps something else. "Tell me," Harry said, quietly. "What do I do with it?" Snape opened his eyes one last time. There was no plea in them, no apology.
"You'll know," he whispered. "It begins by the river, the first time I saw her." A thin smile, barely perceptible, touched the corner of his mouth. Then it vanished. The breath in his throat gave one last push, a rattling, unfinished sound, and then it stopped. Harry did not touch him again. He sat there a long time, the vial in his palm, and the wind rustling through the beams.
between the living and the dead.
The vial was warm in his palm, though Snape's body had already gone cold. Harry stood for a long time beside him. He did not know what the pause meant, respect, confusion, defiance, but he could not bring himself to move quickly. The air in the boathouse was thick with smoke and mold and silence.
When he finally stepped out, the wind met him sharply. Night was peeling away at the edges, and a low, dirty light spread across the horizon like bruising skin. The castle loomed ahead, its windows broken, its towers scorched. The walls no longer held grandeur, they sagged like tired shoulders. Debris littered the grass, and somewhere deep inside, a fire smoldered low and unseen. Harry climbed the slope slowly. The world had not yet found time to mourn. It was still too full of the living who had nothing to say, and the dead who had nothing to ask.
He passed the courtyard. Lavender Brown lay with her eyes open, a sheet drawn hastily over her chest. A boy from Ravenclaw whispered to himself in the corner, wand clenched in a broken hand. A centaur stood guard near the doorway, motionless and solemn. Ron looked up as Harry passed. Their eyes met. Ron opened his mouth, perhaps to ask where he'd been, but said nothing. There were no words left that didn't demand answers. Hermione stood near the wall, tending to a young girl whose arm had been turned to stone. Her hands were shaking. Harry did not stop. The vial in his palm felt heavier now, almost accusatory. The halls of the castle were hushed and foul with the smell of scorched fabric and put-out spells. Stone was blackened. Paintings hung askew or wept in corners. One knight bled rust from a gash in his frame. The stairs creaked more than usual, as though resentful of being stepped on again.
He reached the 7th floor and turned toward the gargoyle, what was left of it. It had cracked down the middle. Its wings were broken, face half melted. But as Harry approached, it groaned slightly, shifted, and moved just enough to let him pass. Inside the headmaster's office, the silence was different, deeper, hollow. The portraits watched him. Some looked ashamed, others simply tired. Phineas Nigellus turned away. Dumbledore's frame was still. The pensieve sat on the desk, waiting.
It looked, Harry thought, not like a basin for memory, but a basin for blood. He stood before it and did not move. The vial pressed into his fingers. His shoulders sagged, the ache from the battle returning all at once. He did not speak aloud. He pulled the stopper. The liquid within shimmered silver blue, and when it spilled into the pensieve, it did not swirl. It settled, slowly, heavily, like a deep pond disturbed by a single stone. Harry took a breath and leaned forward.
A Boy by the River.
The light in the memory was pale, washed through with the silver of late spring. It was not quite warm, not quite cold. Somewhere distant, a factory bell rang out across the river like a cracked song. Severus crouched behind the peeling fence post, coat clutched around him like a borrowed shell. His fingers were thin and bruised, the nails chewed down. He had not spoken aloud since breakfast, though, to be precise, no one had spoken to him. The girl was just ahead. She stood among the nettles and thistles at the river's edge, her red hair lifting slightly in the breeze, her shoes in the mud. She was talking to a flower. No, not talking, singing. It trembled slightly in the air, though her hands never touched it. He had never seen anyone else do it. Severus's heart thudded, not with wonder, but with a kind of anxious jealousy. He had always imagined this thing, his thing, was secret, private, his alone. But here it was, blooming casually in someone else's palm. He waited. The girl's laughter broke across the grass like a snapped string. Severus felt it in his stomach. He stepped forward. "Don't touch it," he said. She turned, startled. Her eyes met his, green and bold, not frightened, but curious. That was worse. "I wasn't going to," she replied. "You'll wake it," he said. "What's it called?"
It doesn't have a name, he swallowed. Not one I'd tell. She squinted at him, then at the flower.
Did you put it here?
No?
Then it's not yours to name, is it?
He stared at her, unable to answer. His coat felt too heavy, his hair too greasy. Somewhere behind them, a shout echoed, his father's voice, angry at the garden gate. The girl flinched. Severus didn't. He was used to the sound. He'd trained himself not to hear it. "You're from Spinner's End," she said. He nodded.
"You talk funny." "No, I don't," she smiled. "You do." She was grinning now, without cruelty. It disarmed him. "I saw you move the leaf," he said quickly, "with your finger still." "I didn't," she replied. "You did." "I didn't mean to. I was just thinking about it." Severus exhaled. "That's how it starts." She tilted her head. "You mean you can do it too?" "Yes." A pause. "I can do more." "Like what?" He hesitated. Every instinct told him not to show her, not to reveal, not to expose. But the loneliness of his body, the rank silence of his house, the stale evenings where he spoke to no one, pressed against him like rising water. He took a stick from the ground, pointed it at a stone, whispered something. The stone lifted 3 inches, spun once, then dropped. Lily gasped. Severus regretted it immediately. Not because she had seen, but because he suddenly feared she might tell someone who would laugh, someone like her sister. But she only looked at him, and her eyes had changed. They weren't amused. They were serious. "Show me more," she said. He turned away, but not far. "Maybe." "I'm Lily Evans. Lily Evans." "I know." "What's yours?" He hesitated, then said it stiffly, like a test answer. "Severus." She scrunched her nose. "That's long." He bristled. "So?" "Nothing," she said. "I like it. It sounds old, like from a story." There was silence. Somewhere overhead, a crow called once and then fell silent again. Lily knelt near the flower. She didn't touch it, but her fingers hovered near its head. "Does it feel lonely?" she asked, "being the only one like it?" Severus watched her. He didn't answer. She didn't press. That, too, he noticed. She rose, and without asking, walked slowly up the slope, toward the row of trees behind the mill path. When she was almost out of sight, she called over her shoulder, "You can show me more tomorrow if you want." Then she was gone. Severus remained alone by the river. He stared at the spot she had stood in. The flower she had spoken to had bent slightly toward her, though the wind blew the other way.
The Path Between Houses.
They met most often in the space between. Not in her garden, where the hedges were trimmed and her mother's laughter spilled from the kitchen. Not in his yard, where the windows were always closed and shouting hummed through the walls like trapped flies. But in the path behind the mill, where the weeds grew tall and the grass pressed sideways from deer tracks. Where broken fence posts leaned like old men who had no reason left to stand. Lily called it the crossing place. Severus never called it anything.
At first, she came with questions. Why does it happen when I'm angry? Why does my sister never have it? Is there a spell that can make people stop yelling? Severus answered in short phrases, his eyes on the ground. Emotion triggers it. No, she's different. Yes, but it's not allowed. Then he would pause, and he'd add, almost as an afterthought, I could show you one. And she would smile.
They met beneath the elder tree when it rained. He taught her how to concentrate, how to say the Latin endings, how to feel the direction of the spell, not as sound, but as will. She taught him how to whistle using a blade of grass. He pretended not to care, but he practiced when she wasn't there.
He never told her where he lived exactly. She guessed eventually. Once, she followed him past the mill path and saw his house. Brick, dark, one window boarded. A man on the porch smoking, not noticing her. Severus saw her from across the street and turned white. She didn't speak of it, and he didn't thank her. That evening, he didn't come. The next day, he was already at the river before she arrived. He said nothing. Handed her a leaf, showed her how to make it hover.
They talked about Hogwarts like it was a city on a mountaintop. She imagined floating candles and enchanted staircases. He imagined silence, books, no fists pounding on doors, a place where no one asked why his shoes didn't match. They laughed once. It surprised them both. He laughed like it hurt. She tried to give him a flower once. He wouldn't take it, said they were too easy to enchant. She didn't offer again.
One afternoon, she came in a dress that looked like it had been bought just for summer. Her hair was pinned. She looked older. He felt something coil in his chest. "You're going to be in Gryffindor," he said flatly. She tilted her head. "And you?" "Slytherin." "Is that bad?" He didn't answer. She smiled, but there was something behind it, a soft worry. She moved closer. "You'll still talk to me, won't you?" she asked. It was not flirtation. It was genuine. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to swear it like an oath. But he said, "We'll see." She blinked. "Don't you want to?" He picked up a stick, flicked it toward a rock. It cracked down the middle. She waited. He said, "You'll make new friends." She said, "I already have one." That night, he sat alone on the riverbank until it was too dark to see. He touched his wand to his palm and cast a light, then let it go out again.
Departure.
The platform smelled of steam, coal dust, and wet wool. People spoke in strange voices, some too loud, some too clipped, dragging trunks behind them, waving polished wands like they were nothing more than walking sticks. Severus stood beside Lily beneath the iron arch marked Platform 9 3/4, his shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into his coat. He had come with no luggage, just a satchel and a suitcase scabbed with tape. His mother had not come. She had told him to go. He had not looked back.
Lily's parents were still hovering nearby, smiling too much, their eyes wide with half fear and half pride. Her sister stood behind them, arms folded like a judge.
Petunia's voice rose just above the steam. "It's not real, Lily. You'll see." Lily ignored her. She turned to Severus and grinned. "Can you believe this?" He tried to smile. It looked more like a twitch. The train loomed before them, dark red and hissing, its windows gold-edged and already fogged with breath. First years were climbing aboard in nervous pairs. Older students strode past them in polished robes. A tall girl laughed as she passed, her cat tucked under one arm. A boy followed, levitating his trunk with casual elegance. Severus stared after them. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Come on, let's find a compartment." They climbed aboard. The corridor was narrow, warm, alive with the tremble of the engine. Doors slammed, owls hooted. A prefect snapped at two younger boys who had tried to bring a live snake on board. Lily laughed again. She opened a door near the middle of the train and gestured for Severus to follow. He hesitated. A pair of older boys were already seated there. They looked up, one with narrowed eyes, the other with polite indifference. Lily didn't seem to notice. She slid onto the bench. Severus lingered in the doorway, his fingers tightening around the strap of his satchel. One of the boys raised an eyebrow. "First years?" Lily smiled. "Yes, I'm Lily Evans. This is Severus." The polite boy nodded. The other muttered something that sounded like half-bloods. Not loud, but not quiet enough. Severus's face stiffened. He turned to Lily. "Maybe we should try another," but she had already unpacked her bag, pulling out a worn book with pressed violets inside. She hadn't heard. He sat.
The train began to move. At first it was just a jerk, then a smooth rhythm beneath the floor. The windows blurred with smoke and light. Severus stared out, watching the city fall away. Chimneys, brick rows, muddy lots, until fields opened beyond the tracks. Lily hummed beside him. She was making small braids in her hair. Her socks didn't match. She didn't care. He wanted to speak, to say how long he had waited for this, that he dreamed of this train, this day since before he could spell his own name, that he knew spells already, real ones, that he could protect her. Instead, he said nothing. And then the door opened. A boy with messy black hair stood in the doorway, flanked by another with pale skin and a hooked nose. The first boy smiled, bold, charming, a little too wide. "Mind if everywhere else is full?" Lily looked up. "Of course." Before Severus could speak, they were seated. James Potter. That was the name he would remember later. James Potter, who made jokes instantly, who asked if they'd been sorted yet, and if they hoped for Gryffindor, who had a wand already polished and a laugh that made Lily turn toward him just slightly. Severus felt something slide in his chest, a small cold shift. James looked at him, sizing him up. "You don't talk much, do you?" "I talk when it's worth it." "Ouch," said James. He grinned. "We've got a philosopher." The pale boy laughed. Severus did not. Lily frowned at James, then turned to Severus. "Don't mind him, he thinks he's clever." Severus nodded, but said nothing. Outside, the landscape kept changing. Forest, field, river, sky. Inside, the air was warm, but Severus pulled his coat tighter. He felt something slipping, and he didn't know what it was yet, but it had already begun.
The Binding of Wands.
The memory opened not with thunder, but with the sound of quills scratching across parchment and a fire snapping in the grate. Severus sat near the back of the Slytherin common room, though it was not the green-lit place of school brochures, but a long, narrow chamber with cold stone walls and a smell of damp earth. Shadows hung in the corners like coats never claimed. His spine curved over his books in the shape of a question mark. He read not with curiosity, but with hunger. His ink was cheap and smudged. His robes never quite fit, but his eyes moved quickly, and his fingers tapped lines into memory with a nervous rhythm.
He did not speak much. When he did, it was in clipped Latin, muttered under his breath, or in snide corrections to boys who had fathers less clever than his own mother. They called him the Bat when he passed, though not within hearing. His spells were silent, sharp, and too precise to be dismissed. Lily sometimes sat beside him in the library. She brought ink that didn't clot, and a smile that he never looked at directly. He taught her how to brew pepper-up potion. She showed him how to soften his consonants so he wouldn't sound like a funeral. When she laughed, he stiffened.
When she touched his wrist once, absently, just to pass a book, he did not speak for the rest of the day. He liked her best when she was still, reading or chewing her quill, but she was rarely still. She had friends in other houses, boys she waved to, girls who linked arms with her and walked past him in giggling groups that made his throat feel dry. James Potter was one of them. Severus had seen him first in first year, arrogant, loud, bright-eyed, the way a candle flares before it burns itself out. By third year, he was dueling in hallways, charming teachers, and hexing Slytherins in the name of justice.
Lily found him irritating, at first. But irritation has a way of aging into affection when it comes from boys who are good at pretending to be fearless. Severus hated him, not because James was cruel, though he was, not because he was arrogant, though he was that too, but because Lily began to smile less often beside Severus when James was nearby. And because James looked at Lily the way Severus did, but without shame.
In 5th year, it happened. It had been raining. Severus's robes were soaked at the hem from walking the outer path instead of the castle corridors. He hated the crowd, the noise. He saw James hex Avery near the courtyard arch, and Severus's wand was out before he could think. A hex flew, a laugh, a jinx. Someone shouted. Sirius stepped in. Lily was yelling now. James had him by the ankle. Severus was upside down. And then he said it. Mudblood. He said it to no one, to the crowd, to Lily, to the air. The moment froze. He was dropped. James sneered and walked away. Lily stood over him, eyes wide, not in anger, in disappointment. She didn't speak, not even when he tried to rise. When she finally turned to go, she said softly, "You're better than that, or you used to be."
He wrote her a letter, then another. He burned the second one before finishing. She didn't reply to the first. He tried to find her in the library. She avoided him. Once, she passed him in the corridor and touched her wrist, as if it hurt. He never touched her again.
The memory shifted. Severus sat in his dormitory, wand idle in his hand, a book open on his lap, a defense text on dark counter-curses. Beside it, a folded parchment. It was not hers. It was his own notes, a new curse, half-written, unpleasant in nature, elegant in structure.
His roommate asked if he was coming to dinner. He didn't answer. He never went down to the great hall again if he could help it.